Dagestan is a unique region of Russia. The rhetoric about the Russian world does not resonate here because they do not identify as ethnic Russians. When leaving the republic, Dagestanis often say, "I am traveling to Russia." People don't consider themselves part of this country because in the rest of Russia they are not viewed as being part of it either. And that's exactly why it should come as no surprise that in the autumn of 2022, protests against the forced mobilization into Putin's army broke out right here. And then later in the summer of 2024, significant armed clashes with the Russian state security forces occurred. The Caucasus is a mysterious and harsh land, where every mountain and valley bears traces of past battles. Here, history is not just told, but passed down from generation to generation through stories, songs and legends. Heroic figures such as Imam Shamil have become an integral part of the cultural code of the peoples of the Caucasus. The struggle against Russian colonization not only left a deep mark on history, but also continues to inspire modern Caucasians to resist. Why do Dagestanis continue to rise up against their oppressors, even when hope seems lost? It may be that the answer can be found within their indomitable spirit, which cannot be broken by weapons or repression. Or perhaps it is not just that. Why are dormant conflicts and discontent beginning to awaken right now? What is becoming the catalyst for new waves of destabilization within Russia? Why is Putin's stability, which Russians were once so proud of, beginning to crumble? Most likely you know the answer, or at least have a good guess. Let's see if our thoughts align. If that's the case, I'll ask you to share this video, give it a like, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so. So, the history of the Caucasus is a long history of unending struggle for freedom. The peoples of the Caucasus, including the Dagestanis, have fiercely resisted attempts by outside forces to subjugate their lands for many centuries. For centuries, Dagestan has been at the center of the geopolitical interests of various empires: the Persian, Ottoman, and Russian. Each of these empires sought to control this strategically important region, but faced fierce resistance from the highlanders. As early as the 18th century, the Dagestanis began to actively oppose Russian expansion. Peter I of Russia, who sought to significantly expand his domains to the south, organized and launched the Persian campaign in 1722, during which Russian troops entered the territory of Dagestan. This campaign became the first significant clash between the Russian Empire and the Dagestanis. Despite their brief tactical successes, the Imperial Russian troops faced fierce resistance and significant difficulties in holding the captured territories, which ultimately led to their retreat. In the following years, the intense struggle continued. Throughout the 18th and early 19th centuries, the Dagestani people rose up in repeated rebellions against Russian rule. They formed strategic alliances with neighboring peoples such as the Chechens in order to jointly resist the advancing invaders. In 1785, a major uprising broke out under the leadership of Sheikh Mansour, which spread not only to Chechnya but also to the neighboring Dagestan. Mansour preached jihad against the Russian invaders, calling on the peoples of the Caucasus to unite in the struggle for independence. From the 19th century, a new phase of resistance began, associated with the name of Imam Shamil. Born in 1797 in the small village of Gimri, Shamil grew up among the mountains, where every stone and every tree preserved the memory of his ancestors' struggle against invaders. He led the resistance movement, uniting Chechens and Dagestanis against Russian expansion. His guerrilla warfare tactics, known as Gazavat, became a symbol of steadfastness and courage. The colonization of the North Caucasus by the Russian Empire was accompanied by countless acts of brutality and repression. Russian troops destroyed villages, expelled the population, and forcibly relocated people in an attempt to break the spirit of resistance. However, the Dagestanis and Chechens, witnessing their lands being forcibly annexed by the empire, rose up in rebellion time and again. Their unwavering steadfastness and deep-seated desire to preserve their unique culture and independence became increasingly evident to the world. In 1834, Shamil was proclaimed as the new Imam and led the fierce resistance in the North Caucasus. He managed to create a confederation of various mountain peoples, uniting them against a common enemy. Under his leadership, many successful military operations were carried out, allowing him to maintain control over a significant part of the region for more than 2 decades. However, in 1859, after more than 20 long years of resistance, the leader Shamil was captured during a large-scale military campaign organized by the Russian imperial troops. Despite his captivity, his spirit remained alive among his people, and his legend continued to inspire future generations to fight for freedom. The resistance persisted into the 20th century. The uprising in western Dagestan in 1920 to 1921 became yet another vivid and powerful example of the ongoing struggle against external oppression. The Dagestanis fought against the Red Army, striving to preserve their independence after the collapse of the Russian Empire and during the Russian Civil War. This spirit of resistance has not faded even centuries later. In our time, just as in the 18th, 19th and 20th centuries, the people of Dagestan are once again rising up against dictates from Moscow, defending their right to independence and dignity. The modern protests in Dagestan can be seen as a continuation of the centuries-old struggle of the peoples of the Caucasus against Russian invaders. In September 2022, protests broke out in Makhachkala and other cities of Dagestan. Women who took to the streets with signs reading "Our children are not fertilizer" became the symbol of a new resistance, reminding the world of the fearlessness of their ancestors who fought for the independence of the Caucasus. These protests are not just a random coincidence, they are the echo of centuries-long struggle of the peoples of the Caucasus against external oppression. The violent armed clashes and shootouts that occurred in June 2024 in the Dagestan region demonstrate that the Kremlin is steadily losing its firm control over regions that were forcibly annexed to Russia. Discontent is growing, and this is hardly surprising. The events in Dagestan are not just local unrest. They could become a catalyst for much more extensive transformations that will eventually sweep across all the regions once colonized by Russia. The people are beginning to realize their strength and their right to self-determination. Throughout history, examples have demonstrated that the Caucasus has often become the primary epicenter of upheavals that led to fundamental changes in Russia's political structure. It was certainly so during the era of Imam Shamil's resistance, and it could be exactly the same situation now. Now let's turn to the most important question of all. What was the specific trigger that finally opened Pandora's box for the Russian state? Quite naturally it is the protracted war in Ukraine. By starting this aggression, Vladimir Putin not only faced international condemnation and sanctions, but also sparked a wave of discontent within the country. The mobilization aimed at strengthening and replenishing the occupation army for waging a war of conquest intensified this discontent, exposing internal contradictions and dissatisfaction. Dagestanis, weary of unresolved economic problems and the dominance of the central government, which drains the republic's resources, including its people, have begun to realize that their real enemies are not abroad, not in the hostile West, but in the Kremlin. Destabilization in Russia will only continue to grow like a snowball. Historical parallels with the past tell us that the Caucasus may once again become the center of this instability. After all, the events in Dagestan are a continuation of the very struggle for independence and freedom that began many centuries ago. It is highly probable that the Caucasus will signify the beginning of the end for the Putin regime, and it is now merely a matter of time.